Episode number 3 of the MEE-FIT Podcast. Today I'm joined with Tommy, one of our coaches here, and we are going to be discussing nutritional approaches for fat loss, which is a pretty common area of discussion amongst the gym here, both coach to coach and coach to client. So Tommy, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit to the audience? Who you are, how you came to be a coach here at MEE-FIT, and just the brief life of Tommy.
Yep. So I predominantly worked in construction since leaving school, and then always kind of had an interest in sports, never quite the gym. And then I think maybe at 21, I actually spoke to you initially for some guidance around the gym and bulking up and all this kind of stuff. And then, kind of from there, got into training, really enjoyed it. Dan was advertising a job, and I kind of jokingly reached out to you about this. And we went out for food, and before you know it, I was doing a PT course with Lift the Bar. Yep. And then, kind of didn't look back from there, and just really, really, really enjoyed it. And then, here we are. And then, in terms of nutrition as well, I've done a little bit extra with that. Lift the Bar was very good in that sense, but I did a little bit with Mac Nutrition as well, a year course with them, and
So just to provide some further context on that, so Mac Nutrition is it's called Mac Nutrition University. It's not actually a degree, but it's a very, very well respected and very, very well detailed nutritional course that a guy called Martin McDonald runs and delivers. And Tommy smashed that course for 12 months, which was very, very challenging alongside work and also house renovation, if I remember rightly.
Complete house renovation was going on at that time, so it was a busy 12 months. But it gave you so much knowledge and expertise in nutrition, and it's helped us a lot here with the clients that we've got, which has been really, really cool. So what we thought we'd do today is sort of go over some common approaches for fat loss, sort of discussing like a little bit like pros and cons, and how we often approach that with clients when they come to us and say, oh, what do you think to this? What do you think to that? What about this? And stuff. So, when it comes to fat loss then, Tommy, I mean, what are some of the main, approaches that people will take? Like calorie tracking, for example. What's your thoughts on that one? Yeah, so calorie tracking, as you've mentioned there, is a pretty common kind of route to get someone to a goal, and especially in fat loss. It's a very, very good one. I definitely say in that sense, because you are essentially tracking what you're consuming, you're keeping a diary, and from that with targets that are provided in terms of calories and protein and things like this, it can kind of paint a clearer picture to that person on what they're consuming and how much they're consuming. So I'd say, it's a very, very, very good sort of method to use when it comes to fat loss, and like you said as well, a very, very common one.
Who might that be best, or some types of people that might work best for?
I'd say if someone has got quite a specific goal, also obviously being with technology quite inept with that, because it obviously involves you using the app itself, but I would say it's pretty universal as well. Like, we've had people here at the gym of all different ages, different goals, use it and get on fine with it. Some people may not, because obviously, like I say, it does take a little bit of work with technology and actual time to do it. But it's a very universal method, and I think that's why it is a very good one.
We'll often use it, especially for an educational tool.
Yes. So I think that is probably, I always think that as being like its strongest point, especially when you're starting out, because I was definitely a victim of this when I first saw you. I personally had a goal to kind of gain muscle and gain weight. And I think I remember rightly saying to you that I felt like I was consuming an awful lot of food. And then I think you introduced me to it, and I'd went away and I'd tracked, and I'd realized very quickly that I wasn't consuming anywhere near as much as I thought I was. And this probably applies to a lot of people on the other side of the spectrum with fat loss, where they would think that they are not consuming too much food, and then they go away and they track everything and they think, oh God, actually, I am consuming more, and it gives them that feedback. I think on that point as well, when it comes to actual food, is providing people with an education of what certain foods contain. I found this really helpful initially, because you'd log your food, whether you barcode scan it or search in the database, whichever method you'd use through MyFitnessPal, and it would provide you with, what certain foods contain. And then from that, doing that over a series of a period of time, you get very good at realizing, what's in certain foods and what to kind of look out for, maybe when you go shopping or you're eating out at a restaurant.
Yeah. So the old thing of like over or under reporting, yours was obviously over reporting, which is pretty common for, well, it happens to a lot of people, but usually younger males who are wanting to bulk up and like gain weight. I remember those conversations, and I'm like, Tommy, like you're not eating that much. Like you can't be. Your body is a very honest representation of your current habit, of your nutrition, and also your training. You were a roofer, up and down ladders all day, very active, and clearly not consuming that many. On the flip side, like you've rightly said, the bigger one that we probably deal with is underreporting, which is probably a podcast for another day.
Yeah.
But as a general insight into that, what's typically going on there?
It's a difficult one to answer in some respects, because I think sometimes, like when people are using it, they won't report the bad days.
Yeah.
So that's quite a common one. So I don't know, let's say the weekend, people tend to eat very differently. If they've maybe not had a great day when it comes to food, they may not report it. And we see this a lot. So when people we go through people and we work with people who use this method and we look at their days of tracking, we often see that in the week when they've got more of a structure and they go into work and, everything's a lot more structured, they'll track their food, and then the weekend will come along and we see gaps.
Yeah. And
that's definitely one of the common things. So I think it's, just avoiding those bad days when it comes to it. And then the other side of it as well is like, as honest as we try and be and as good as we try and be with it, you're never going to get it 100%.
Yeah.
I know we're not going to go too in depth with it, but obviously when we talk about this with ourselves, we refer to that study with the dietitians, and they were 20% out with their results, and their dietitians will have a very good understanding around nutrition and what food contains and all this kind of stuff, and even they were inaccurate by quite a margin. You're never going to be perfect with it.
No.
But on the flip side, again, people will often avoid their bad days, so to speak.
I think what you just mentioned there is very true. And I think with calorie tracking, like a lot of clients who come to us who, if they've said that type of thing before, like, I don't feel like I'm eating enough. Maybe they've not calorie tracked before. That's just their general perception, or that's what people have told them. Yeah, they're probably eating considerably higher amounts of food on certain days and having 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 calories on a weekend day. But all they can seem to remember are the weeks where they're really slogging it at their diet and they're eating nothing but like salad and soup and, oh my God, why is it not working?
Yeah.
But then if they did then track those days, they would see the clear difference between the week and the weekend, or it might not be the weekend for some people, but that's just the common one we see, isn't it? Maybe they're forgetting things like alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah. It could even be small things as well, though, like butters and oils and different things and sauces and things that we just we wouldn't necessarily think about too much, and adding those up over the course of the day and the week can come to quite a substantial amount. But you've mentioned there things like alcohol, very calorie dense depending on the type of alcohol you're consuming, but not only that, the decisions that it leads to and the other things it affects as a kind of a...
But people won't often remember those alcohol calories, will they? Like they'll think, oh, I don't eat that much, but actually I'll have 3 bottles of wine at the weekend. And you're thinking, well, that's like, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 calories worth of wine that you're forgetting that you consume. And I would say, just linking with what you said there before about how people will do certain days, I know I'm less of a fan now of MyFitnessPal than I used to be in my early days as a PT. Like I remember when you first came to me and in the early stages of MEE-FIT, like I just felt MyFitnessPal was like the holy grail. I'm thinking like, if everybody does MyFitnessPal, just tracks your calories, you can still eat a bit of what you enjoy. I'm just thinking, why is everyone not just super shredded all the time? But then you do that for a period of time and you realize just how inconsistent people will be with it. Unless you're going to do it like religiously and consistently, there's barely any point, in my opinion, because you're just almost confirming to yourself what you already know, which is that you can eat well on 2 or 3 for 4 days a week. And you're just completely ignoring the bad days that are probably the ones that need tracking.
That's definitely something I learned early on, thinking exactly the same way. MyFitnessPal, this will be it. You can track everything. It'll be easy. You hit these numbers, we'll get these results. And then they weren't happening in that
And
manner.
I've realized more about the challenges since becoming a parent. Like I would say, you know, your ability to track calories consistently and the amount of time and attention you want to give to doing that is so much harder now than it used to be. I could still do it if I really wanted to do it, but it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of consistency and a lot of bandwidth, which you may or may not want to give.
I'm definitely in the exact same boat as yourself with that. When I was using it, when I first started using it, I was probably 2 years I was using it for that period, and you know, I'd like to think that I was very consistent with it and I kept it up. Going back to that now would be a challenge. I think.
I suppose you could do it if you really wanted to.
I think personally, if I had a goal for something, I'd probably introduce it then.
Yeah.
But the one thing I would say is I feel like I've come very good at maintaining myself because of it.
Yes.
You know, I play this ridiculous game when I go shopping of guessing how many calories are in a certain food. I take a lot of pride in getting very close to it as well. And that's just come from the education that's provided.
So it's done its job, hasn't it? It's educated you around food, which you didn't have, 9 years ago.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's definitely the biggest pro to it, I believe.
Yeah. So if you're someone who's, you know, wanting to lose weight, can't seem to understand why you can't lose weight or whatever, like definitely, well, not always, but it could be a really important step for you to spend even a month doing it, getting that clear understanding, and then you can hopefully utilize the skills and the knowledge.
Yeah, when I have nutrition chats with people here and things like you've mentioned now, I'll often suggest to them having like a 2 to 4 week sort of keeping a diary. Yeah. Because for one, I get to look at it, which is really helpful, but also they get to see what they're doing as well. And it could be MyFitnessPal, which probably argue is the easiest method, or it could even be writing it down on pen and paper and just giving you that understanding.
We've done picture diaries as well, haven't we, before,
there's
like take a picture of the food. And
there's other ways around. Like I said, it is a diary. It's a very good one, and you like to think it is the easier option of the few out in terms of time consuming. But that's definitely its biggest pro.
Love it. Intermittent fasting.
Yes.
Could be going in in deeper here, but just give people some insights into that one as if people haven't heard of it before, or they might have a different sort of perspective on it. But from your side of things, like what does that look like typically?
So to make it sound very, very simple, essentially what we're looking to do is restrict the window of eating during someone's day. Now, depending on the hours, that's a different story. But typically, let's just say someone would do an 8-hour window. They would only look to consume their food between 12 and 8 p.m. And then outside of these hours, they would basically not consume any food.
Yeah.
So the idea around it is to just shorten that eating window and therefore look to bring your intake of food down because of it.
What's your thoughts on that as a method? You know, how often do you recommend it to clients here? Or
I think it is a very good method. I think the first reason it's a really good one is because it's very simple to implement. Yeah. And also, again, going back to what we said with MyFitnessPal, it's universal. This can fit most people's lives, depending on how they like to consume food and what they're doing for work and things like that. But I think, like I said, because it is just restricting the hours that you're consuming food in, that is a very simple and effective way to bring someone's intake down. Yeah. So that's why I think it is a very good method. And I would definitely have that chat with a lot of people in terms of like, is this something that could potentially work for you? What
could be some of the downsides to that, or the issues people might face when implementing that?
I think adapting to it if you're someone that has been consuming food throughout the day. I think for myself, again, just talking personally, like I like to kind of consume food right through the day. So it's kind of as soon as I wake up, I'm a breakfast person, I'll have my breakfast. And then probably every 2-3 hours I'm consuming food. If I was to go into an intermittent fasting route myself, that would come as an initial shock.
You'd waste away.
I probably would. My meals must be massive. So I think that would be the case for quite a few people. Yeah. But the thing is, that is initial. Like you will adapt to that. Yeah. We've seen people do it before where they've struggled initially because it's a bit of a shock. Yeah. But adapting to it over a couple of weeks, I feel like it could work for anyone. Yeah.
Because typically, really, what most people will do from my experience with it is most people will just push their breakfast back. Mm-hmm. And won't have breakfast at say 6, 7 a.m., 8 a.m. It'll be my first meal's like lunch. Yeah. And then I eat then from lunch through till sort of evening meal. So that's really what it ends up being like.
That's why I mentioned the 12 to 8 being quite a common one,
Yeah.
because I think out of all the typical 3 meals you have, breakfast is the one that some people can leave or have. That's why it tends to be. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
You know, it can depend on the person completely. You can kind of alter that window as you please. I think just going back to one of the biggest pros with it as well, and why it is effective in terms of you consuming less food is, you know, let's take that window, for example, the 12 till 8 or a 10 till 6. Most people, when they finish work in the evening and they're going home and they're chilling on the sofa watching TV, that's when they're generally binging in food.
Yeah,
that's when you're eating your crisps. That's when you're eating your biscuits and your mindless kind of eating.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, if you kind of put this simple method in place and you go home and you finish work and 8 o'clock comes around, all of a sudden your mind's thinking, oh, this window's ending now.
Yeah.
And just that kind of simple mindset can have quite a great effect in the long run with it.
Yeah.
So I think that is why, you know, it is very effective. And
for anyone who's listened now and thought, oh my God, breakfast, like I thought that was really important. Like I've heard all my life that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and like I couldn't go without it. Like what's your thoughts on that? What would your message be there?
It's certainly not that. I'd say, you know, it's individualized on how you feel and how your approach is to eating food first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
Like I said, some people really, really want breakfast in the morning. That's myself.
Yeah.
I'm one of the few people that when I do train in the morning, I do actually like to eat before I train.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I think like yourself,
you
know, you won't generally consume food before you train in the morning.
No.
So I certainly wouldn't label breakfast as being the most important meal of the day. It is just a meal.
And the research doesn't support it either, does it?
That's that.
One of the big arguments that people will make for breakfast is you hear people say if you don't eat breakfast, you will eat more later in the day. The research doesn't support that. Typically, if you save yourself 600 calories at breakfast, for example, you won't then go and eat those 600 calories later in the day. Like they might eat 200 more or 300 more, but you're still going to potentially save yourself a couple of hundred calories by taking out that meal and putting some of those calories into later in the day.
Yeah, I'd definitely playing devil's advocate to that as well. I'd be looking at people who say they don't have breakfast, but then what are they doing between that time and then when they have their lunch?
Yeah.
You know, whether people are going to Starbucks, grabbing
like latte.
That kind of stuff, and just keeping an eye on that as well.
Yeah.
Because people will often say, you know, I'm not having breakfast, like, and you know, I'm struggling to lose weight. I'm having these 2 meals, but like, what are they actually doing instead?
Yeah.
For some people, it may be more beneficial for them to actually have breakfast.
Yeah.
And it would help kind of reduce those cravings, maybe, you know, early morning at work or on the way to work or whatever.
I suppose the message there then, as it often is, as boring as it sounds, is it's going to depend on you, isn't it? As an individual, whether you like breakfast or don't like breakfast, whether you're hungry in the mornings, not hungry. Like you said, you will adjust to that. Yeah. I remember when I first started doing intermittent fasting as an approach, I was always had been a breakfast eater, and it took me a few weeks to get over that hunger in the mornings, but your body does adjust to the routine that you give it. So I generally don't eat breakfast. I probably eat it a bit more now that I've got the kids than I used to do, but especially if I'm trying to lose fat, I will immediately go back to intermittent fasting because it just works for me as an individual, but it's not for everybody. The other thing I would address with this or you know, get you to talk about is like how often people will think it's this magic. Fasting is magic and it's got these special powers above and beyond just actually providing someone with a method of achieving a calorie deficit. What would your thoughts be on that?
I think it is exactly what we've just spoken about. Like the biggest pro to it and what it actually does is, what it's designed for, is it's to get people to consume their food within that controlled window, therefore consuming less calories and also, looking to essentially bring that down. That's kind of its main purpose and focus. So what you said there, you know, in terms of the magic powers and stuff around it, like, no, I wouldn't.
So if you just spread out the same number of calories across an 18-hour eating window, it would have the exact same effect. It's just a method of encouraging someone to consume less calories.
We see it with all these different kind of diet methods that people will sell them on these like magic formulas, and none of them are, unfortunately. You know, like you've said, you know, we keep coming back to it. It's an individualized thing. It will, if it suits that person, fantastic. If it doesn't, then, you know, it's probably not the one for you.
Tools in the toolbox, as we call them.
Yes. Yeah.
The next one that I wanted to discuss, this is where you really could go down a rabbit hole, but we'll try not to, is keto.
Yes.
Ketogenic diet or very, very low carb diet.
Yes.
How often do we use that one here at MEE-FIT?
I think I have used that I have never encouraged someone to do it myself. I know there has probably been maybe 5 people I know in this gym that have done it in the past. Whether they've heard it online or, I'd say there's hardly been any people that I know that have really engaged in that.
But it's still in the toolbox though.
Yeah, again, I'm not going to sit here
lean on often.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here, and kind of hammer into keto. But I think the big thing with it is for the vast majority of people, it's going to be a very difficult diet to follow.
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort, doesn't it, and a lot of pre-thought around events, social occasions, interactions that are not under your complete control to implement effectively. Just give people an insight into what that term actually is, which we didn't do. So ketogenic, or what does that typically look like for people?
So generally, it would be a high protein, high fat diet with pretty much minimal carbs. Yeah. I think they're up to 10%.
Ends up being like less than 20 grams, less than 30 grams of carb.
Basically a very, very, very low carb diet.
So it's going to be meat,
fish,
dairy, certain dairy, fish, vegetables, barely any fruit because of the sugar content, which is going to take you out of keto. So true keto is where your body goes into ketosis, isn't it? Where you're utilizing dietary fat for fuel rather than carbohydrates. And that's a process that your body has to go through. A lot of people say they're doing keto, but they're really not. They're just doing a low carb diet.
Just doing a low carb.
But true ketosis is obviously a phase that your body has to go through. I've never been through it, but I hear there's some pretty big side effects initially in terms of things like brain fog, headaches.
Yeah, again, it's an adaptability thing again, though, isn't it? That will pass. But it's just that out of all of the ones that we've certainly talked about, that's going to be the one that's going to be the toughest to adapt to and come with probably more side effects than the.
Why would some people do that, do you think?
Well, the main purpose of it was, I believe, in the 1920s, 1930s, it was kind of used to kind of help battle epilepsy. The funny thing is, as far as I'm aware, your knowledge may be different. I don't know if they're still 100% sure why it is. I think from what I understand, it's a combination of the fact of it being very low sugar, high fat. Those two in unison alter the brain excitability, and it's something to do with that can help. It's a funny one, but that's why it kind of come into popularity. And then from there, like everything, it kind of gets branded as something it's not, and kind of pushed out there as like the diet to lose weight.
So why is it not that then? Why do you feel it's not the magic bullet that some people will describe it as? And keto, the trouble is with nutrition is people get very dogmatized by the thing that's worked for them. So you'll see, I can think of a few off the top of my head, Instagram accounts of people who follow a pure keto diet or a carnivore diet or whatever. And this happens with like slimming clubs. It just becomes that's the be all and end all. Why is that not the case specifically with keto? Like, why is it not the holy grail that those keto warriors will describe it as?
So the biggest problem with it is keto is sold as, or it's sold by some people that we talked about there as being a fat burning tool. Which is half true, because if you're not consuming carbohydrates, most of your diet is coming through fat and protein. All of a sudden your body's next energy source that it's going to go to is going to be fat. So essentially your body is burning fat. However, that doesn't mean that you are losing body fat. And this is where the waters get muddied a little bit. So it'll be sold on this fat burning tool, which is half true, but in terms of what people are kind of viewing that as, it's not the case. And also what will happen is, let's say you've got your average Joe who's consuming, 40, 50% carbs in their diet. From there, if they think, right, I'm going to go keto, and they go into keto, and all of a sudden, their carbs have come from 40 to 50% to below 10%. Carbohydrates have got a very high amount of water that's attached to them when you're consuming carbohydrates. So all of a sudden, you have taken those carbohydrates away. You're now consuming next to no carbs whatsoever. What's going to happen with that is your water weight within your body is going to drastically drop. So when someone steps on the scales a week after being on keto, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I've lost loads of weight. But the reality is, when you do that over a series of time, sticking to keto, is that weight is just going to, like any other, nutrition method, it's going to have the same results.
Yeah.
Because what's happened is you've just basically flushed out a load of the water that carbohydrates are bringing into your diet. And then the minute, you eventually go back to consuming carbohydrates again, it's just going to come back on again.
So that's why the initial week or so of any new diet shouldn't be viewed as representative of what's about to happen moving forward. We see that with a lot of things, don't we?
I understand.
Most people who start their diet on a Monday, they spend the weekend binging out and eating all the things that, I've been guilty of it before. Me and Shan we have an Indian takeaway the Sunday night because you're like, we're going on a diet. We're all guilty of it. But then typically what happens is people weigh in on the Monday and they're 15 stone. And then the week later, they're 14 and a half stone. And they're like, oh my God, I've lost half a stone in a week.
I understand it. It's like I say, it's like same with anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
If someone's desperate and they take up a new diet and, within a week, they follow this diet and they lose a load of weight, it's going to be the magic pill, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then, like we see with a lot of these things over a sustained period of time, 6 months, 12 months, there's no difference between any of them.
Yeah. And I suppose just touching back on the keto then, so the initial weight loss people see, the immediate weight loss is obviously because of the water retention that you've mentioned. Very little of that first week is going to be fat loss because you're not going to lose fat that quickly. And then longer term, I suppose people are forgetting that it's still due to the fact that keto has allowed you to create the calorie deficit that you need by basically removing one of the major food groups.
Yeah, so that's definitely a pro when we're talking about it in terms of if you have got goals to losing weight. Carbohydrates for most people will take up most of their calories. You cut them out, all of a sudden you can consume less food. So there's a very good chance you will lose fat and you will achieve those goals, providing you can stick to it. Yeah. So when with the diet also being very high in protein, with a lot of the foods that you've listed there, people will tend, when they go to keto, will consume more protein. That is a pro as well. Protein being the most fulfilling macronutrient, that's going to help people battle hunger and again look to bring their calories down. So it definitely has its pros. It has its place for the right people.
But the results are due to the calorie deficit that it helps you create and not the magic effect of keto, which I think is the important point that we want to make, because every diet that we talked about there is just a method of creating that deficit that we need and not the special diet that is the one for everybody. And that's what I suppose our nutritional approach has always been, is to fit the diet to the individual rather than fitting the individual to the diet. You share the same mindset on that, definitely.
Yes. Like we've kept saying through all this, it's very individual. And, we always preach here of trying to get, when it comes to nutrition, trying to get things to kind of suit the person so it can be more of a lifestyle change rather than just a diet, which is a funny one because obviously we've had a chat recently regarding that, and the research doesn't necessarily always back that up. That's probably a whole different topic.
No, I think we can delve into that now. So we've always preached sustainability, haven't we? And always sort of focused on, like, if you're going to make a change with your diet, make sure that it's something that you can envisage doing in 6 months, 12 months, which I think is probably one of the biggest problems with keto for most people. Not everybody, and some people who are out there who listen to this, hey, keto's the best. But for you it is. But like, for some people it's just like the worst nightmare. A life without chips, a life without dauphinoise potatoes, a life without bread, for me seems like horrendous. Like I hate that. But that's me, and that's not you, so that's fine. Do you know what I mean? But we've always talked sustainability. However, we've also tried to base what we do around what the research says, and the research seems to indicate that sustainability isn't always the most important factor.
It's a bit of a bugger, really, isn't it? Because obviously everything that, like you said, we preach is about sustainability and being a lifestyle and doing things that kind of work well for you. However, when you look at some of the research, it can often suggest that losing a lot of weight in a shorter period initially has been shown that people are able to keep that weight off and also maintain weight better over 12 months, which, like I said, it kind of goes against a lot of what we say. But
you can understand why, though, can't you? If you're someone who's, let's say, I don't know, 18 stone, right? And someone said to you, okay, slow and steady wins the race. You're going to lose a pound a week. They're thinking, oh my God, this is going to take bloody months and months. So I suppose that if you said, right, okay, we're going to get a stone off in 4 weeks.
They're
going to be like, come on, let's do it.
I think in that situation that you've just mentioned there, it's trying to utilize people's motivation to the best you can.
Yeah.
And like you said, if you've got someone who, I want to lose 4 stone, and then you're like, right, £0.5 a week, we'll get there.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, what? I'm ready to go. Let's do this.
Yeah.
So it's working with the individual and utilizing the motivation that they have. I often liken this to like a dimmer switch. So like when you've got them and it's like, right, really motivated, I've got a clear calendar, I'm ready to really push this and put a lot of focus into my nutrition. Right, let's use it. Turning that dimmer switch up and pushing it a bit more. When it gets to that position where, they have probably taken a bit of a toll with it, they've achieved good results, but they're thinking, our motivation's dropping a little bit now and it's getting tougher. That's when, again, working with the individual and kind of turning that dimmer switch down and being like, right, okay, cool. What we'll do now is we'll spend a period of time where we're just going to try and sustain these results, maintain them. When you're good to go again, we'll
turn it up. Love that. It's a great analogy because I think most people, that's probably where most people struggle, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that, again, that's what the research indicates is like, most people can lose weight.
Yeah.
Most people who've struggled with their weight over the years have lost weight. So it's not that they can't lose weight, so they can't keep it off.
Yeah.
And that's probably where that dimmer switch analogy is really important rather than just an on and off thing. Because typically what happens is people lose a stone, go back to their previous habits because they can't be asked to diet in that way anymore, and they just go back to normal.
And also I think as well, like, it's not sexy to talk about it.
No.
I think the big thing is, when people go on diets, right, I'm going to go on a diet. I've lost a stone in, a month or whatever. People are like, that's awesome, brilliant, well done, excellent. No one's saying, I've managed to maintain my weight in 6 months. No one talks about it. Yeah. They should, because that, like we know with the research, is one of the biggest things that we're battling.
Yeah.
So that should be definitely more highlighted. It's something that we definitely try and
So I think that that does agree with what we're saying and our message though, because I suppose we're not trying to say that you shouldn't try and lose weight quickly. Like if you're 20 stone, I want you down at 15 stone as quick as possible to get your health in order, blood markers, all those other things. But I just want to make sure that when you get to 15 stone, you don't go back to 20 stone within a year. You stay at 15 stone for the rest of your life, or you get, you know what I mean? Like you don't just revert back. So that's where the sustainability comes in, I think, is making sure that you've got that plan for afterwards. Like you know what to do moving forwards. And that's where most people, I suppose, fail, isn't it? Is they don't know how to maintain the long-term benefit.
Yeah, so like I said, it's just not spoken about enough. You mentioned things like Sunwell before, like their biggest wins are like, what have you lost on the scale this week?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't lost anything. Right, come back next week, see how you get on then.
Yeah.
And it's just not spoken about enough generally. And it's definitely something that needs to be highlighted more. Because it's a huge part.
Yeah, it's boring, but it's what's going to give people the long-term results that they're after. And that's why I suppose, as much as we're happy for people to approach fat loss in a quicker way, I suppose we still want them to do that through dietary methods that we wouldn't approach like the typical yo-yo diet approaches.
That's one of the cons, to trying to lose a lot of weight initially, is it can create that kind of yo-yo mentality that you've spoken about there. Lost loads of weight, brilliant. We don't really care what happens after this. And then they put it back on and it's like, well, we'll do it again. So that yo-yo effect. Whereas when it is more of a slow and steady, and that could be the plan phase after you've lost the initial weight, having that slow and steady approach is great because it gets them to practice what they've achieved. And also, it's a lot more fun because they can start including a little bit more food. You can start feeling a little bit more normal and not like they're just aggressively trying to kind of smash it all the time. And in that time period, like I said, it's kind of rebuilding the motivation to go again as the body adapts. And then when we get them there, right, the next phase, now you're feeling good to go again, is we can now focus on losing weight again.
I suppose it's part of it is building the habits around the maintenance that people need. And because most people struggle because they don't know how to actually eat and behave to maintain the results they've achieved. They know how to diet to lose the weight, but then they don't know how to stay there. So that gives you that time, doesn't it, to learn those skills.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's just not something that's spoken about enough. So it's a really important phase that should be highlighted a lot more, because it's kind of trying to break that cycle of one of the biggest things that we're battling with is yo-yo dieting. And it's trying to fight that.
So what would be, just to end this really, because I think we've covered off a lot of good stuff there, like if someone who has been struggling with dieting and fat loss, maybe they've struggled on and off for years, they've tried some of the approaches we've suggested there, some have worked well, some have worked not so well. What would your kind of message be to that person as to how to best approach this moving forward to make sure that they are more successful?
I mean, if it was me having the chat with them, I'd definitely want to kind of delve into a little bit more of what they've done previously and how they've gone about it and why it didn't work for them, and then come up with a plan from there.
Well, I think it's time for us to finish up the podcast there, predominantly because it has just started absolutely pelting it down outside. And unfortunately, we're recording this in our team training room, and it sounds very, very loud here on the microphones and the headphones. So yeah, thank you, Tommy, for your time today in sharing that, and hopefully that's been helpful and insightful to anyone who's been listening. So yeah, we will speak to you all again soon.